Ready?
No. Yeah. Oh, wow. I win. On the day it's due.
It's still yesterday in some countries in the world, I think.
It was due today.
You know what?
I'll do this.
We have
A new image and
undo it, make it less. Give up already. Glasses. Clearly, we know airport. Clearly, Apple's still making
Still make the flying sausage.
I think that's
Does Apple still make the flying sausage, isn't it?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. They're all in the machine now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, so this is Ed Baroff. He's the studio director of
Yeah.
Fan Games. Right. Works right around the corner from here, so take it away, Ed.
Hello.
Hello.
What's up? Not too much. It's weird to sit at this. I'll stand and then I might sit.
Yeah.
So, you know, I didn't put together a extensive PowerPoint or sort of specific talking points or anything like that for coming in today, but I wanted to basically give you a background of myself and what I've been doing and sort of my path through the game industry, and then talk a little bit about sort of, seems that some people are doing game development, some people are just doing sort of whole app product development. So let's just talk a little bit about making and building products and getting them to market, and you know, whatever you guys want. I mean, I'm happy to go into any sort of avenue of questions and that sort of thing. Try to be laid back, warm my Crocs. So, you know, I just had lunch with some people and asked me sort of how I got into games, and I played them. I'm a big fan of playing games, and you know, as a kid, I was really just always about the game industry. And at that time, it was sort of like, you know, there's that Far Side comic where the kids playing video games and the parents are proud, and you know, that was not my family. I was not supposed to be playing video games, and you know, playing video games now is big business and jobs and growth of the United States and industry, so it's a good thing and place to be. But so, you know, I was playing games, and I actually am not, I'm sort of what falls into the category of creative director slash producer sort of studio guy. So, you know, as a kid growing up, I wasn't an engineer. I couldn't draw, I couldn't program, I couldn't really do anything myself to make a game other than think about them and just have that want to do, and rather than doing it. So I went to the University of Michigan, and actually I started a group there called Wolverine Soft. Still around today, which is fabulous. But basically, I expected to get to this gigantic campus, about 10 times the size of this one, and you know, have all these groups of people making games, and it just wasn't the case. So decided to make an organization to do so, and so it was about playing games and reviewing games and trying to make them, and hit or miss, but eventually made some games and graduated and started a company called Theorysoft with some of those people out of school. We were working on a Game Boy Advance title, failed. It's going to happen to people. Really focused on the product, and you know, did that thing where you're like, look at these hundreds of pages of design docs and all this idea, but really what they want is just a vertical slice of gameplay, so they could be like, that's fun, that's what we want to do, that's what we're going to fund. No one's going to fund a small group out of college to do this big thing. Back then, you guys have a very different landscape, and I'll talk about that. But so that didn't work out. Ended up doing QA with Atari, based in Beverly, and then in Sunnyvale, California. QA went into production and design. It was sort of interesting. I was hired on as an associate producer at Mind Control, and the first thing they had me do was make, single player and multiplayer levels for Field Commander for the PSP of all titles. And it was one of those interesting experiences where I'd always wanted to do game design, but like could never find an avenue to it. And I got this production job, and then I was doing game design. It was this weird, like, that worked. And so I did that, and I sort of moved up through that organization, lead design, senior producer, project manager, eventually studio head, so that was in Mind Control. worked at a company called Tabula Digita, where they are, let me get this right, education for the video game generation. And they're a very interesting company doing somewhat sort of hardcore, hardcore is not the right term, but first-person shooter competitive math and educational titles. So tournaments where players are running around in this 3D environment. It's called Evolver Dimension, and they're, you know, using math and science and now I think all types of skills, answering questions or, you know, getting the ball that's worth 8 and putting it over the ball that's worth 4 for, you know, the gate that's 2 and stuff like that. So it's actually a lot of fun. And then I moved on and currently I'm studio director at Blue Fang Games, which is up the street. Blue Fang Games has been around for a very long time as an independent game studio. In June it'll be 13 years. I wasn't there for that entire period. But they made the Zoo Tycoon franchise with Microsoft, and Zoo Tycoon 1, expansion, Zoo Tycoon 2, expansion. And they did all of that, and then they moved on from that product and ended up doing some console development with World of Zoo for the Wii, and then transitioned into mobile, social, and online development, which is, I think, primarily what we'll be talking about with. We did Lion Pride for iPhone, Lion Pride huge for iPad, and we did one of the few Kindle games out there. We did Reversi or Othello for Kindle and Rocket Reversi, and then also on Facebook we did Zoo Kingdom on Facebook, as well as the Oregon Trail and Carmen San Diego, which are two brands I'm sure most of you are at least somewhat familiar with. And so throughout that course, I mean, really what I've been doing is, again, I can't make anything, right? I'm only able to work with other people to get them together and motivate and help them make things better and quicker and faster. And then, you know, drive it along through the process. And so I, you know, on a regular basis work with engineering and art and design and collaboration and bringing teams together to build product. And really when you're working in groups, even if it's, I mean, I think this is basically a CS course, but even, you know, with groups of engineers, you still have different people playing different roles and driving. And so everyone always plays sort of the motivator and collaborator and all these different components to make anything. And, you know, I specialize in games, right? But, you know, that just, a video game's just a little bit more visual with a little bit more interactivity than an application that, you know, is a little bit more database or some other components. So really at the end of the day, it's about making products. Products now are rapidly developed and deployed things. I mean, you know, what I was talking about back when I was doing our own company, back then, you know, we couldn't just, we probably could have, I had 10 years experience back, but, you know, just put something on, you know, Android and get it out, or do something in iOS, or do a web game. I mean, that market and that space really didn't exist like it did today. But really, I mean, you know, from a student or independent perspective, it's quite easy to, that's with like a big qualifier of what easy means. But in terms of being able to be out there and make something and then get it distributed and then have people engage it and potentially purchase it or play it or use it is really straightforward and accessible, and you know, people are spending money on these products, investors are looking to get into newfangled college type stuff. So, you know, there's a lot of interest in the next, there's a lot of interest in just usability and you know, taking applications that take things that haven't been digitized yet and sort of giving you a digital side to them and sort of gamification, and, you know, providing bonus and earning and sort of the Groupon, level up type stuff to engage people, and really just everything's going in this direction. So, you know, again, my feeling was, and I'm happy to be pushed in that direction, was that, you know, I'm sure a lot of you guys have different questions about everything from sort of the minute sort of technical execution standpoint, but also probably from a process standpoint. So I thought I would jump into sort of questions and that sort of thing. If it's just silence, I can continue talking, but you know, I can talk this whole time. That won't be hard at all. So if you guys have any questions, that'd be a good place to start. Oh.
So I have a question about, so some of these groups are building apps and they want to launch them. Do you have any suggestions for marketing on the mobile platform?
So in some ways it comes down to, you know, when you think about marketing an application, there's a couple ways you can think about making an application. One, it's like an assignment, you just have to do it, right? But aside from that, it's something where either there's this creative passion where you're like, I want to make this, right? And then when you come at it from that angle, marketing is the secondary thing.
Right.
That's not necessarily the best way to think about it if at the end of the day, one of your core objectives is to sell or to distribute. Sometimes it's a matter of thinking about the market and then making a product that fits that space. So for example, you might be creatively driven to make, you know, some glass beer drinking application, right? But, you know, you might do that and then come to the market and say, oh, there's 1,000 of these. And mine looks exactly like 7 other ones that are all free. So I don't have anything that differentiates me. This is just another product in a sea of products that's identical. And, you know, there's all different types of inspiration, and I always think you need to drive with inspiration and passion and do what you want. But sometimes it helps when you're thinking about marketing, especially if you're in the middle of a product at a place where there's some flexibility in terms of what comes out on the other side, to really do the research up front. Look at the platform, look at what's available, look for places where you see an application that does this and an application that doesn't do this, and maybe what you weren't going to do was a little bit over here, but you could move it over and sort of fit that gap. Those things are going to, you know, it's like paying there is going to help you significantly when you get out to the market, as opposed to just building something without thinking about any of those components and then just getting out there and saying, how am I going to market it? So, you know, then once you know, nothing, I mean, I think one of the most powerful components to anything you guys can do is making it compelling, extremely compelling, or extremely useful. I mean, those are the sort of creative, sort of exciting, memorable experience, or just something that's indispensable. And that is going to go a long way, because that'll get the strongest promotion, which is sort of word of mouth, sharing. I mean, you know, one of the things everyone's going to do is if it's a game, you might look at a network like OpenFane or Plus Plus or Crystal, whatever. There's a series of them that are out there that help distribute it, expand your product, or Playhaven. There's tons of them. If it's a game, you do something like that. If it's an app, you probably look at it. You know, there's that like baseline requirement of like, okay, we're going to let you be able to share, and we're going to have an auto tweet, and we're going to have all these things that sort of instantly try to incite virality. But you know, I think again those components are only as effective as your product is compelling or useful. I think they don't solve marketing on their own. They really flourish in environments which, you know, promote that. From a straight up marketing standpoint, and again, I would start there, but from a marketing standpoint, you know, it depends on the device and platform, right? You know, if you're going to work and move towards Apple and iOS, you know, that's a marketplace that is actually, you know, it's a pretty standard marketplace. You have a lot of users who are engaging and spending money, so you have, you know, the market's there and the spend is there. But, you know, there really is a big difference between those that are featured by Apple and those that are not featured by Apple. And really part of that, again, is going to be looking at what products, you know, they have all their categories, and you know what category, or if you don't, you should figure out what category your product is in, and look at what's in there, and look at what's getting promoted, and maybe think about why it might be. Look at reviews, look at things, and sort of think about what, if Apple saw this, what would be compelling for them to want to promote this to users? Or is it just the same as this other application? If it's just the same as this other one, they're probably not going to promote you. That's really your sort of the biggest win on Apple, is getting their support. And you know, despite the massive volume and things that are moving on, I mean, they really do respond well to small developers. They, you know, intuitive, you know, interesting products. I mean, I think that really is a path that, you know, getting spotlight. Maybe not the gigantic app of the week type thing, but just, you know, one of their new and noteworthy, that sort of thing, you know, is attainable. But then, you know, when you're looking at just that's not going to happen and just want to get promotion. Friends and family is great, you know, just to start, but then, you know, there are a network of sites. Some are specific to games, you know, like Touch Arcade or some of these other ones. I mean, there's tons of them. Some are specific to applications, and I'm less familiar with them. But really, spending the time, reaching out, you know, promoting what you did, sending out your promo codes, and this is sort of Apple specific, and trying to generate that awareness is effective. And the Android market, the Android market's, it's a very different experience. I mean, when you submit to Apple, you're gonna, they sped it up, but they're gonna like look at what you did and review it, and they can kick it. Android market's much faster. Like you put it up there, it's gonna be up in 2 hours, and it's gonna be on sale, and there's no real entity guiding it. It's just much more of a free marketplace, and whatever that means. But it's the same sort of thing. I mean, there's sites and people who focus on that sort of awareness and check this out, and that's sort of what you need to do. But it's tough. I mean, and it also comes down to what you're trying to do. I mean, if you're just trying to make something cool and get it out there and get users and get good ratings and focus on quality, if you're like, no, my business plan is I want this title to, push out and sell 10,000 copies in the first couple weeks, and that's a whole different sort of trajectory, which requires more actual spend. And the only other thing I'll mention is there's more and more companies. There are big ones like Duolingo, but even smaller like Fuse, and there's dozens of them which sort of, they're like publisher / metric analytic entities, and what they're able to do is you associate with their product, and Playhaven does this, and you whether it's advertisement on your screen or it's a little like a more games or spend my points type of thing, they build these back-end networks that work with the Apple affiliate program, where and Android, they have similar things, they're just not called that, where they'll actually look at your application and they'll do the different things to push it up. I mean, all of these markets, more true on Apple, I think, but all of them have this sort of awareness, visibility component where, the more people that see your product, the more popular it is, and the more popular it is, the more, these things that shoot things up. But there's a science behind it, and there are numbers behind it, there's thresholds, and there are organizations that really specialize in understanding those thresholds and knowing, that you might want to spend $100 promoting your product and just spend it and just lose it. But they know that if we kick it in at this point, it's going to get us to that threshold, so we're going to maximize that dollar. So partnership with an application is another path to get out there. But also, the one thing I'd stress is like, especially if you've never done it before, it depends on how much you love your idea and you think it's going to change the world. But if you've just made an application and it's cool and you want to put it out there, just do it, see how it does. You can always take it down, you can always change it, relaunch it. I mean, no one's going to remember anything like in a week, what was released and what wasn't. This isn't like Christmas launch in 2010. I mean, there's so many products, things can be rebranded. You can take something down, redo it, get feedback. I mean, get through all those loops and then come out with an even better product. So I wouldn't be shy about just launching and seeing what happens. And, having a thick coat of skin. I mean, this is the anonymous internet, right? People are going to be, just, you'll have the praise, which is always fun. You're going to have the people that are going to just tell you your work is awful. And it may or may not be. I mean, that's up to you to decide. But that you just be ready for that.
I can go first.
Sure. Considering, say, an app that has data backed by a server, and people start using it, we launch it, and a few weeks later realize this business model sucks, so this app is just hopeless, and you want to disband it. What sort of, does our certificate, what sort of liability do we have towards our users?
Well, typically you would put up a terms of service. Well, let me say this way: if it's free, there's none. I mean, if no one's paying for the service, and you bring it up, and then it's not, if it's a free application, there isn't really. Now, I guess if it's some application where you're taking their credit card data and say, but assuming it's just this is a leaderboard for my game, there's no obligation to maintain that or keep it up. Games come up and down all the time. When you get into sort of, applications products that you're paying for, I would even say there's a lot of gray area when it comes to the application that you download and you own, and then some online secondary feature that is supported by a server. I mean, again, if it's something that you're really concerned about, you could look at what the specifics are. But generally speaking, especially in free, but even on pay, there is no standard obligation in this space for virtual goods. Wow. When you look at a product like you know, some of the easy places, you know, for example, just taking a big one, look at WoW, right? You read the terms of service that you've agreed to every time they do an update, every time you install it, you're like 16, if you're playing WoW for an extended period of time, you've hit that button like a lot. And you've never read it, which is fine. But if you look at it, if you actually sit down and read it, you'll learn that you have absolutely no rights. You own nothing. And if at any time they don't want to run the game anymore, it's gone. You don't have any recourse. And you know, I have some personal opinions of where that's going to go and Shudder, as we have these products these virtual good products that have 200, you know, 100 million user player bases. I think that's going to come to a head. But as of right now, I mean, that's pretty much standard. That it's just you have a license to play with this stuff until deemed, you know, not profitable or whatever.
One thing I've always worried about after I graduate is I don't want to end up as like what people I guess call a code monkey, like working 18 hours a day in like a windowless cubicle, not really interacting with anyone, getting carpal tunnel and like a hunchback. How do you like prevent that from happening? Like how do you
Exercise.
Well, there's a couple of things. One, you know, I mean, to some degree, it's how you look at it, right? Like, you know, that might not be the greatest existence, but for some period of time where, you know, you're getting paid to program and improve and expand your skill set, there could be some period of time where that's something that you're willing to do for resume building or experience building, or just, you know, like, I have $250,000 in school debt that I have to take care of. I mean, there are reasons why that might be an acceptable path, but you know, first and foremost, I would certainly say, you know, as an engineer, there are quite a number of avenues you can take your talent, and you know, the ones I think that fall into the category you're talking about tend to push towards the higher paying, non-creative industry roles. I mean, maybe financial sector or some other sectors where engineering is like this side thing you put into a room and you don't talk to because they're engineers. In the game industry, in a lot of web industries, you know, engineering is the core of development. I mean, depends, you know, a lot of, you know, you have engineers that are social and asocial, but, you know, at least in every game company that I've ever worked at and ever been to, I mean, the engineering group is always a very accessible component of development, and web space they are as well. And so I think looking at, you know, you can avoid it by just looking at opportunities in organizations that have a culture where, you know, engineers are valued at more than just their ability to do the keyboard thing. I'd also say though, you know, whenever you're faced with a challenge of sort of a grind, you know, you just need to say, well, I'm doing this, but you know, in those 2 hours I have before I get to sleep for 2 hours, I'm going to do something on my own that's highly creative and interesting, and you know, you balance it out. But you know, one thing I'd say is, at least as far as, you know, the studios that I've, you know, Blue Fang now, Mind Control, is engineers oftentimes, I mean, oftentimes everyone has to work hard, you know, and there's a lot of work to be done, but it's never like, it's usually, you know, very rarely is it not just a team thing where like, if we're gonna have a crunch or we're gonna, you know, stay late and take care of something, is it just like an engineer? I mean, it's usually everybody or everyone involved in that project. I mean, you know, it's interesting doing live development, right? So we've talked about console a bit, we talked about mobile, but we also do Facebook development. Facebook development, you know, there's one thing where your servers is something you can take down and put up because it's, you know, a leaderboard or some database, but you know, when you're dealing with a live Facebook product that's basically, you know, a casual MMO, you know, uptime is important. If there's an issue, the server goes down, you know, you need to bring everyone in to take care of it. But again, I can't think of the only people I know of in the game industry that like, you know, get shuttered in a closet for 16 hours are the engineers that like, as far as I can tell, prefer that. Most of the time, engineering's highly, I mean, again, you go to a really, I mean, I'm used to, you know, as a hobby, and you know, the dev organizations that I've been a part of have been, you know, anywhere from teams of 3 to probably 50 or 60. Like I haven't done 350 person development teams, right? So I imagine once you get to a certain size, you start sequestering, and you're like, well, there's the, engine team, and there's this role, and they interact with everyone. And then we just have the 10 engineers that just make everything happen behind closed doors. But mobile development, engineer is a core part of the team, and everyone wants the engineer's time. I mean, again, most engineers I know feel they're too distracted. They don't want people to be bugging them all the time. They want a place where they can have silence and quiet because, there's that, it takes me 15 minutes to get in the groove, but I can get taken out of the groove instantly, and then it's going to take me 15 minutes to get back into it, thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just ask when, talking to a lot of people about jobs and interviewing and that whole process. The other things, when you apply to an organization, you get to the point you have some sort of on-site, presumably. Look around, see is it an open environment? Is there a pit, or a pit maybe is pejorative, but is there open desk where people are working together and collaborating? There are a bunch of people in closed doors, like scratching "help me" on the wall. I mean, get that vibe. And feel free to, everything, via Facebook or LinkedIn, or whatever other social/business network you're a part of, you can get in touch with people that work at that company. You can have a nice conversation with a friend of the guy who is, some, systems engineer or whatever, and just ask him, hey, what's it like to work there? And they'll let you know.
I have a question. Can you tell us a little bit about what the process of large-scale game design looks like? And you talked about producers and artists and game designers and all this stuff. We know about how software develops conventionally, but what's different in the world of game design?
Well, it really depends. Maybe actually it's whiteboard. It really depends. What?
Whiteboard's awesome.
Yeah, they are. What's the core to game development? Whiteboards is what's the core to game development.
I don't know what I can do with this. It's stick.
I'll just leave it hanging in the middle. Maybe I can use it in a diagram. Pendulum, not. So really, when it looks at core game development, right? There's different sizes, right? And what you're going to do to make a small mobile product is maybe different than your casual product. It's different than you're going to do for a larger console product. Also, when you look at, have no doubt when you look at something like a Farmville, Cityville, these gigantic, Facebook social games that, people still think, well, Untalk's not making games. Those are huge teams. Those are gigantic development teams. They're not, it's not 3 people when they're at that stage.
How big do you think that is?
Well, actually, Zynga just filed IPO, so I think if you read all that information, you probably could find the exact number. But you're typically going to see, I would say, for a social Facebook game, you're going to see an initial core team. Again, I can't say for sure, but initial core team that you're going to have maybe 8 to 12 people. It depends on, a lot of times it depends on whether or not you count support and whether there's support groups on other products. You're going to need somebody who's in charge of operations, but is that on that team or is that a shared resource? And then you can look at, so it starts at about that size, and then you're gonna grow to 20, 30 people for just a larger game, like a 2 to 10 million user game, and then you could probably balloon up to 40, 50 localization, QA, all those different groups. So one thing I could do quickly, without getting into maybe just I'll look at 2 teams. So I'll talk about Lion Pride, and I'll talk about, let's say, the Oregon Trail. So this is and this will be the original, this is the iOS, mobile version. And this is Facebook, right? And so, basically, when you look at the core team for Lion Pride, this was a very small development team. This product started with myself, and so I was sort of, we'll say producer slash, designer. We could call this project lead. You can go by a lot of names. And this is you know, in smaller mobile games, in smaller social games, you know, in casual games, that industry oftentimes has a producer that sort of is the vision holder, the driver of the product. And this is really true in a lot of web work, where it's really this producer that's doing the sort of coordination, time management stuff, but is then also responsible for driving the project and the sort of the basis design of the product. Now there are some, you know, game industry is whatever studio developed in the way it was it an engineering driven startup, was it a creative group, was it a sort of production business oriented? However it formed and started and grew oftentimes creates weird offshoots of this model, and it's different. But a lot of times what ends up happening at some point and at some size, and we'll talk a little bit about it at the top, but as the groups get bigger and bigger and bigger, a lot of times production and design split, and you really just have sort of designers and creative designers, a creative director and sort of that design path, and then you have production, and that's really the producers. And usually at the top, you'll have a creative director and an executive producer, or creative director and senior producer, executive producer, and lead, and whatever, it's a position thing. But you have two people, one's in charge of getting it done and getting it out, and people and budget and, you know, sort of money and time, and one's in charge of making sure it's awesome. And there's this general thought that, like, these people, you know, are going to fight, and they're going to have their priorities, and it's their job to basically have a push and pull, give and take to, you know, create the best product possible on time and on budget. And, you know, that's a very common, you know, way of handling it. Sometimes it's just one person. You know, in the case of Todd, it was sort of a team in that role, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But there's very often, you know, because there's this feeling that you need sort of the evangelist, or you need that person that's only focused on the user experience, only focused on the quality sort of, you know, fun, if you talk about it that way. I don't use the word fun, but piece of it. And depending on the group, you could have a creative director that is over the art director. You could have an art director that is in line with the creative director. You could have a creative director that is the art director. I mean, you know, any project, and it's all very collaborative, and people have roles. I mean, the bigger you get, the more it needs to be a position. So in this case, you had Lion Pride. So, and what I was going to say is the project lead, you know, it just so happened that I was that producer designer. A lot of times, in a lot of your groups, somebody will sort of play that role as the engineer / designer. You know, usually, if the designer doesn't also do the production stuff in a really, really small group, then, you know, sometimes it doesn't feel like they're carrying the weight. So that sort of, wow, you have an engineer doing his thing and an art doing that. It's sort of naturally, if you just have this, when it's the engineer also doing the design, that just means they go build stuff, they bring it, and they say, I need some art. And if it's an artist doing it, they draw, you know, they do something highly creative and visual, and then people execute it. I mean, people drive in different ways. Usually, if it's from design in a small group, that person's also sort of pushing the project. But, you know, it's something that's always, you know, for me, making games is about the people you're working with, and executing is about, you know, working with people, understanding them, and not having like 3 artists and 3 engineers, but saying, I've got Joe, and I've got Sally, and I've got Jorge, and he's good at this, and she's good at that, and he's good at this, and that's sort of what the composition is, and this is the dynamic of the group, and this is how we're going to execute, because he likes having spreadsheets, and she hates them, but I want him to do his best, and I want her to do her best, so I'll give him a spreadsheet, and I'll give her a task list, and, you know, I'm a little bit more about, you know, maximizing individuals. That's not, you know, different people do it in different ways. But so we had the producer, designer, then we had the, I'll just go with bullets. We had sort of what would call it, art lead. You know, it's called art lead. It was Lou Catanzaro, who was the art director at Blue Fang. So I mean, calling him an art lead here is just more of a positional thing. He was the only reason, you know, you're calling him art lead is that he did all the art, so he was responsible for all the art. Whereas in some of his roles as art director, he might just have an art lead who's doing the art, an artist, and he's just guiding it. In this case, he was very fundamentally making art. And then we had our lead engineer, which I guess it's art lead and it's lead engineer, for whatever reason. This was Lajos. And this was the core team. I mean, came up with the design, put together a specification, direction, what we wanted to do. Started out primarily working with Lou in terms of coming up with the idea and then visualizing what it would look like. Then we passed it on to Lajos, who said, the engineering thing. He's like, well, I can do this, here's a bunch of questions, and here's stuff that isn't gonna work. And then, then it's a collaborative, when you're this small, it's a collaborative process where, sometimes, everyone else talking, again, at lunch, all this work, all you're doing, it's always about, it's all work, right? And again, I'm a builder, I'm somebody that thinks about things as work, but any decision anyone makes is work for other people or themselves, right? So I want to do this thing, and they're like, well, that's a lot of art, and that's a lot of engineering. And it's like, well, why don't we do this? And it's like, well, that's no art, I love it. And it's like, well, the engineers, that's a ton of engineering, I don't want to do anything. And so you gotta make the decisions that sort of balance out the workload, or I mean, Lou happens to be, one of the most prolific working artists I know, and so he certainly wants things to be done right and go with engineering solution, but he can also just say, look, it's going to save Lajos some time. I'll just copy and paste and crop and go through and do all that stuff. And I'll hand draw it because whatever. And there's a lot of that at this stage. I mean, you're trying to make something. I mean, again, this was concept to launch a 7-week period. I mean, and Line Pride again was featured by Apple and is still on the market and doing well and well reviewed. Then there were some. And this was a component of having, doing this offshoot mobile project at a larger organization. This was the core group. And then we had some additional support, which oftentimes for you guys would be like friends and family. But so one person we had was Helen Zhu. And actually, it's not Zhu, it's Zhu. It's just Z-H-O, but Z-H-U rather. But Helen's fantastic. She's half artist, half biologist. So she's a great fit at Bluefang. But so she actually was responsible for some art assistance, and then she did all of the, if you ever played the game we have. So Line Pride, which I should have started with, is a line tracing, sort of flight control game mechanic where I can control a pride of lioness, because actually, for those that don't know, lions just sleep all day, and the lioness actually go out and do things and hunt and protect and all that stuff. But, well, the lions are protected, it's really needed, but otherwise they're sleeping. And so, your animals come onto the frame, and you gotta drag you've got to start with 1, and then you've got 2 and 3 lioness, you've got to kill warthogs and zebra. And so she did all the sort of info facts about each one of the, zebras and elephants and all that. So we had this sort of art assistance and as I said, zoo facts, animal facts, I guess. And then we had some QA help from Richard Baker, who was, again, the QA manager at Bluefang, doing all the World of Zoo stuff, but he helped us out on the QA. And again, these are things where you're going to just get friends and family to help you out. We were able to leverage it. Post-launch, the title was doing well, and we ended up, a lot of these people moved on to other things, and then a number of additional artists, engineer, not additional, it's not like an additional because it was not concurrent, but like a different artist, a different engineer did some more work on the title, and I don't need to name them all, but they're in the credits. But they came in and did expansion packs and updates for the product. We added more levels and more content. That was Zach and some other people who did that. Corey, there's a couple more. But so, and then there's other things. We had Scott Triola, who's COO of Bluefang, helped out with some of the marketing and pushing out the product. So we did balloon, a little bit you get assistance from other people to do things. But again, from a core product perspective, it was this team, we had the support here, and then over time we had some more things. You know, mobile development. You get to make it and sell it, and then never touch it again if you don't want to. If it's buggy or you want to expand on it, you can, but you make the product, you put it out there, and you get to go do something else. It's a very different dynamic than Facebook development. We had leaderboards, which engineering did. Google, whatever their service is called, I forget. But you know, you built it, they're up and running. I think they're still up and running, you know, $10 a year, I don't know how much it was, but you know, something marginal. But that product, just as you make it and it's out there, and you know, it still sells copies this day. And you know, we did the Touch Arcade, we did all the sort of pushing it out and promo codes and updates. Community, really spending time on your boards, finding, you know, users that become evangelists, users that become sort of your core outreach people, and leveraging that. And then eventually, like 7, 8 months later, when the iPad was coming out, we had actually done all this art in Flash, so it was really easy to up-res it, and we launched it. We did a conversion to iPad, sold that, so both of those on the market. So Todd Facebook development was a much larger group, and really the other dynamic, this was fully independent, this had a publisher, so there's a whole level of publisher relations, documentation, presentation, approval, that sort of element. But from a project perspective, you know, the Todd core team was, so we have this, this layer, which is, because we are also doing CS, right? We actually developed both of these products concurrently.
When you say the publisher, you mean the people who actually own the rights to the Oregon Trail?
Yes.
Okay.
And the funders. I mean, so that you can just license a type, you know, you could say, you know, we want to make the next, I don't know, Thor game, and we're going to, well, that's not a good example because it's like big. I mean, you know, we're going to make the Breakfast Club game, right? And we're going to find the guys who own the Breakfast Club, and we're going to license that title, and we'll tell them, we'll give them a cut of the revenue, or pay them the $20,000 they want for the license, or whatever it is, and then sort of fund it and do the development on your own. More often, when it comes to bigger IPs like a Thor or something like that, or in these cases, the developer or the publisher, and again, the learning company is interesting in that they're, you know, they're not really in the game space. I mean, they do a lot of game stuff, but they're not like THQ or EA. They're not just like this giant. Their business is not solely video games. They have books, and it's actually huge. One of the older companies still around in Boston. I mean, they're Hollow Myth and Hardcore is just huge. Own tons of textbooks, and I mean, they're a big group. But so, you know, they own the license for both products, and they also fund the development for the products. So you have to show them what you're doing and all that stuff. And so actually, we developed both of these titles concurrently, which was actually quite a feat. But we developed them concurrently in about 10 to 12 week period. That's sort of first to market and expression.
What was the RCS? Was the other one?
Oregon Trail and Carmen San Diego.
Carmen San Diego.
Oh,
Yes.
And we developed them, and we had the same structure here, which was, so we had a sort of director level group. And loosely, I'll draw it like this. Say we had me, as a studio director, and then we had art director, design director, I don't think his title is engineering director, but I'm just going to say engineering director, and this group. And so then we have, over here we'll have, so this is going to be like, I'll do it like this. Over here we'll have our sort of, you know, director of marketing and analytics. And he's not really in the product side of things, other than looking at metrics and stuff like that. Now, with the dynamic at Blue Fang, you know, sort of from this directional standpoint, this group tended to be Lou, Adam, and I. John, and before that, Jeff, were involved, but they tended to do a little bit more of the creative was put together, the sort of specifications were put together, and then they came in and evaluated and gave feedback and sort of drove, pushed the engineering. But when it comes to sort of design creation and feature sets and that, you know, it was more of this dynamic. And what was interesting about this is, so again, art director Lou is obviously, you know, a fantastic artist, but highly, his priorities are sort of user experience, engagement, sort of the visual story and access you have with the game and the experience with the game. And, you know, it's about the emotion, and really it's just like hyper creative, you know, a step away from systems, much more, he's an artist, much more visual, much more what's the experience, what's the player doing, what's their emotional, how's it going to be visceral, what's the touch, what's the feel. While Adam is much more of a, and sort of part and parcel with that, Lou tends to be, you know, very ambitious, you know, let's do this crazy, not crazy, not maybe the right word, but let's do this big thing, you know, that's a lot of work for, you know, he doesn't have a box. He just thinks about what he wants to do, and then we worry about the box. Adam is much more conservative and much more of a systems designer. So he's really about, you know, really defining core design and what the experience is from a sort of interlocking parts, you know, he designs with pictures, he designs with, you know, data and words, right? So, and so oftentimes these two guys are in conflict, right? And so really my role is, in this relationship was very much a role where I'm sort of in the middle where sometimes I agree with Lou and sometimes I agree with Adam. And really the dynamic of that group was this sort of controlled conflict, which was similar to what I described with the producer and the creative director, but in our case, since ultimately I had the ability to just veto or push whichever way I wanted while collaborating with those guys, you know, we were able to have the discussions, have the conflict, but also then be able to resolve and develop. And so that's one of the ways I'll say in doing any of these types of projects is it's really important to have owners and have decision makers and be able to move and not get in quagmires and get, you know, when you're talking about such short development periods, if 3 people sit there and argue over some UX, you know, I think that the start button should be here, or I don't think we should have a start button because I just want to go right into the game and have this lead experience, or, you know, all of those, and you sit there and you argue and you argue and argue. Having a defined decision maker, I think allows you to execute and operate quickly, and it's just paramount to getting things done. So, after this, and I guess I'll do this. We had lead designer, lead artist, and then a second artist. We had lead server engineer, lead client. So for what it's worth, this was Flash. This is Java. We used a open source server originally called Darkstar, and now called Red Dwarf. It's pretty effective piece of technology. And then we had a second Flash engineer. So 1, 2, 1, 2. And producer. You know, artist reported to Lou, designer to Adam, engineers to John, producer to me. And this was actually mirrored identically on, and I'm not actually going to use this as a mirror, so that doesn't make sense, but on Carmen. Now, the other thing we had in this case is we actually had some more resources. We had some like extras, not necessarily, but we had some Flash resources and some art resources that sometimes shifted between projects based on need. So we had some resources that were sort of in both places. And we actually use a bunch of outsourcing as well. But, so this is your core development group. But then there are some more important positions here that are really core. So we had our community manager for our live products. That was an important position. We had our ops manager in charge of servers, deployment, uptime, downtime, all that stuff. We had, this secondary role for John, which is hard to describe. It was like PHP/Facebook/API/other/etc. Right? This is like this catch-all, role, which you have all this stuff when you're dealing, when you're dealing with Facebook, you're communicating with Facebook. You have, so a user logs in, and you're talking with the user using, via your website or your page, but you're also talking with Facebook, and you're getting user data. And all this talking and the frame and all that PHP and the API for Facebook, it's just a mess. And it's all just different things going on. And so he really played this role of, and it's absolutely critical, and no one else wanted to do it. But there's a role of like just handling all of this other stuff that came in. And he's actually excellent. So, this really, and then also we had an analyst. Who looked at our metrics. So originally, you start out the product, you have a design, and we'd already made Zookingdom, so we had a good head start on that, and you put together the design specification, you start building. Then at some point, so other than having to deal with a server and a client and Facebook, which is just a very complicated development environment as compared to just doing a mobile application. Once you, and Flash is its own headaches, but that initial period of development is pretty standard. I mean, you're just making a game, right? And then at some point, you sort of get to this minimum viable product where you're like, we're going to take this and we're going to release it and it's going to be live. And that's when the development really shifts and where these other roles start becoming more and more prevalent and more engaged in what you're doing. And so, with both the Oregon Trail and Carmen San Diego, we were doing, so you launch and then you're like in fire period for 2 weeks where you're just fixing things and things are breaking and it's just, builds all the time. But once you sort of get into a rhythm, we were doing weekly builds of the product. And then as that rhythm moves on out, you do every other week.
Was it weird working on two projects at the same time? Like, in the sense that, how did you focus on doing one thing while also simultaneously doing another? Wouldn't that get confusing?
That's my superpower. Your superpower is focus, right? No, how do you do it? And that while this was out, Zookingdom was live. We launched a Reversity product. Me personally, I've been working on multi-platform, multi-product concurrent development for a long time. But again, I'm not exactly a doer, right? The way this works is this team here is, as I said, mirrored on the other side, and they are focused. That is all they're doing, and they're not. This designer is only worried about that game, and this artist is only worried about that art. Now, that can break down when Todd has a milestone, or Todd has a build, some problem, or Carmen has some problem, or whatever, where suddenly you're like, well, we need some help over here. So this server guy's going to help him out, and that's something from a studio perspective we just have to be really careful with, because the more and more there's this, so I've always been a proponent of agile development, right? This idea that, and I don't even mean as defined in some book, but this idea that literally agile and that we can move people around and be fast on our feet, and we need work over here, we move it over here, we want to do some development, maximizing resources, moving them around, doing that whole chess sci-fi thing. But what happened is that Facebook broke that, I think. Got to the point from a studio perspective where, you can manage and have a lot of different mobile products going on, or casual games, or a handheld game, and you can have them all going, and because then they end, and then they're gone, and they disappear, and they don't require ongoing support. What ends up happening is, and this is sort of more of a business reality of Facebook development, is but you develop a Facebook product, and it's live, and it needs to be supported. It's got a team associated with it. So it never goes away. And in fact, it's actually more complicated in regular development once it's live than when it's not live, because you're dealing with, change the Facebook platform changes, or user feedback, or bugs, or just this array, or just maximizing the pressure on a Facebook project for profitability is outrageous, and pushing metrics, and improving the user, the engagement funnel, the acquisition funnel, retention, monetization, all these sort of buzzwords. But really, looking at, this is, so I didn't talk about it, but then, so the products go live, and then so we have we've built in all these metrics, and we're getting data for everything, what players are doing, when they're spending money, how long they're playing, and this is getting pushed into a database that pushes up to, we use NetCharts, but a dashboard that's visualizing all this information. And so we have this dashboard of best-selling items, how long players are playing, when they leave, when they buy money, when they spend money, all that stuff. And then basically Scott, and at this time it was Darius, worked to create both automated reports and just regular access to this information. Because data, most people can't actually just look at data and understand it. There's this process of exposing data and exposing it in the right way for it to be meaningful. And then there's analyzing it. And so they would work putting together the information and engaging the director group, and me in particular mostly, but it depended on the situation, with that information, saying, okay, well, we just implemented this feature, and here's the good bullets, and here are the bad bullets, and then talking about fixes. And sometimes it'd be like, we need to fix that today. Stop, let's go fix that. And other times you're like, well, we'll fix that in the next build, or we'll do another feature about it. But that becomes one of the most important loops, because community is really important, and I really think that what you hear from fans and engage from fans is critical. But at the same time, you'll find very quickly that the vocal, it really is this vocal minority. It's really a very small percentage of your players who are actually getting really active and doing that sort of component of it. And you want to get that information from them, but there's also this whole gigantic group of other players. I mean, we're talking about 0.1% versus 99.9% that's playing and experiencing and doing things that you need to be aware of as well. And the only way you get information from them is to look at this data. Whereas, a player who's in the community, who's on the boards, is just going to tell you. I think there was another point I was going to get to, but I lost it.
Fascinated by your talk about team building and how they work, because that's what I'm personally interested in. Can you talk about how to foster a good team dynamic, and how to be a good manager, I guess, or a good leader?
Well, certainly. It comes down to the type of, I think, understanding who you are and understanding what drives you as an enthusiast and as a manager is critical, because especially when you're contributing and doing the development, your impact on people is high, whether it's high because you want to see everything they're doing and interrupt them constantly, or it's high because you don't get in their face and you let them go, and then you get into situations where people weren't communicating with each other, and you don't find out until the end of the day that somebody spent an entire day working on something that was off spec or misunderstood. So, for me, my balance, I like my balance, but it's my balance, has always been this juxtaposition between I care and I don't care. And the way what I mean is, I think that I have a good rapport with people, and I'm very genuinely interested that they're comfortable, and that they, as a studio, we're doing everything we can, from a lifestyle perspective, and that, they have open access and can contribute and be part of the team and engage. But at the same time, when it comes to making or decision making, I mean, I'm also very comfortable just saying that's the decision, you need to go do it, and having sort of that split. And for me, generally, like, I tend to be gruff as a person. Like, I don't know if I'm being gruff now, but I'm a pretty, I'm a gruff guy. Like, I was telling somebody, I spend like 95% of my day, editing what I'm saying, right? Like, I know what I want to say, and I know what I should say. And so, and getting that balance between caring for people, but also saying, look, this is a job, this is what you need to do, that's really important. I mean, some people, I tend to be a director in the sense that I keep people tasked and engaged, and I like people who, my ideal is you're here for 8 hours, you're working that entire time, and then get out of here. And I'm going to build a structure where that's what it's going to be. But when you're here and working, you're working. That's my thing, and I tend, it's an efficiency type thing. There are other groups that are more like, no, maybe we're going to go later, but it's not a problem to stop for 3 hours and just play a video game and have sort of a, that more relaxed ping pong game environment. And I think, it falls to that split of producer and creative director, right? One sort of environment produces creativity and gives space for different decisions and space for more thought and more sort of natural and emergent, creativity. And the other one's more oriented. It's more like, it's faster, it's more predictable, it's more, get things done. And it's always, a balance, I think. And for me, it always ties into what our business objective is. But, again, I always think it's important to understand people you work with. What they're good at, what they're bad at, what they respond to, spending the time to get familiar with people so that, it's not about, you want to treat everybody. I remember a couple of, I think it was Lou, always used to say, do you do this with everybody? And the answer sometimes is no. And the answer sometimes is like, well, this is what you respond to, and this is what they respond to. And this person does really well having a schedule. I'll put the extra time and effort to make that schedule for them. But if this person doesn't need it, and they don't, it's not like an issue, I don't need to do that. I mean, that's my form is very tied to what people respond to, because I sort of look at it as, again, what can I do to sort of maximize what everyone else is doing? But really, all I would stress is listening. Now when I say listening, that doesn't mean doing what people say, but listening and giving your perspective and being willing to argue and not argue and knowing when to have the conversation and when to say, that's just what we're doing, because I'm not going to sit here. But also, just engaging, leaving room for creativity when you can, letting people collaborate and just have, to some extent, it gets hard when, as the games get bigger and it's harder to say, like, we should all just have fun, and people would be like, well, that's not really what it is, it's a job. But, if you're working on a small product, like one little thing for me, as an example, is you can have a vision for how the art looks in your product, right? And you're like, this is what it needs to look like. But you have this artist, and she's fabulous at this type of art and this type of art, and she could probably do what you're asking, but it's not like what she's into, and that's going to mean that she's going to drag her feet and not get it done, and it's always going to be it's always going to be a hassle. Whereas if one of the other styles are actually fit the bill for your needs, is it attractive, and all the things that matter outside of your ego, and it'll work, just go with it. Because again, originally, like I started making games in college, right? And nothing is harder than getting somebody in college to do work, like, period. It's really, right? And so, we'd get together and people would have sports and they'd have class and they'd have this thing due. And really, if you wanted people to, like, you have no authority over them. You have, like, social authority. You're not their boss. They're not being paid. They're not getting any money. It's by virtue of the collaborative effort that something gets done, and by virtue of people doing things that they enjoy. So on small, independent products or projects, I think it's always important to try to feel that out, because trying to, giving somebody a responsibility, hey, you're gonna do all the levels, and then they do one level and then disappear, and then, you know, you gotta just, it's such a headache.
Okay, time for me to be gruff.
Time's up. Time's up. Hey, you know, I told you I could talk.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Do you guys do, we asked over lunch, but does Blue Fang take interns ever? And it's okay to know?
You know, we do. Ultimately, it comes down to, you know, a lot of people want internships. You're really, from a studio perspective, you're looking for somebody who really has a lot of drive and desire, but also, you know, to some degree, you know, you don't want an intern to take more energy than the intern has. But, you know, we do. I mean, everyone, especially, you know, there's paid internships and free internships. Free internships.
No,
You
but
know.
those take time, but
You know,
your
those,
equation still.
everyone's
has
interested in
that.
that. You know, and you know, right now we're not, but that's something that, you know, there's tons of game spaces. I mean, there's tons of stuff around here, tons of companies doing web, really dynamic stuff in the Boston area.
How would you suggest these guys finding places where they could apply for internship? Any job boards or meetings or whatever they should go to?
Well, you're not gonna you know, it's pretty rare you see, we're looking for a summer intern. It happens, but I mean, really what I would suggest is ye old fashioned, you know, go to places and just get it. I was really impressed. We had an intern just recently by the name of Graham. He, man, like, you know, email, and he got people on LinkedIn, and he coordinated, and he met somebody who knew me, and he had them contact, you know, like, you know, wow. Like, I don't know, you know, it's a little too much, but I'm sort of impressed at this level of effort. But I mean, again, I don't know for like non-game companies like web, but like there's a site called GameDevMap.com, right? And it's this big map, and many game companies it's just like a world map, and you say like Boston, Massachusetts, and it's going to list every game company in the area and their website, period, that is signed up. But it's pretty exhaustive. I mean, I find it's almost complete. Click on that, look at their website, find their contact, send out the contact, call, email. Now, again, one thing you really need to communicate, this is really important, is always, don't think about, you know, you're like, oh, I want to get an internship because I want to get experience, and I want to have it in my resume, and I want to get in somewhere. That's great, that's your business. Our business is what value you can add to the organization, right? So that's really what we, you know, I don't want to hear necessarily like, I mean, this is the care, don't care, right? I'm not necessarily interested in like the classes and the, you know, this is what I'm good at. Here's what I can offer. You know, I've 2 years in CS, and you know, I've done this project. I can do this. You know, if you're looking for an art internship, I don't think there's anyone in this group, but you know, you're going to have to come with some good art. I mean, every once in a while, there's that opportunity to bring someone in where maybe things are a little light, or you know, there's a bunch of rudimentary tasks that need to be done, and you know, the art director will say, all right, let's bring them in, and then there'll be like more training involved. But most of the time, if you're looking at internship, you really want somebody that's going to come in and add value. And so, you know, again, if you can demonstrate your qualifications, if you can, you know, show what you've done, that's worth doing. But I'd also say, I mean, as valuable as an internship is, if you're looking at the same period of time and you have enough grit to sit down and yourself or with some other people and just do something on your own and make a game, you know, as far as getting a job in the future, they're like equally valuable. I mean, it depends, but it's not like I'm going to make a game, I'm going to send a few emails out, or I'm going to make an app, send a few emails out, do a quarter of it, and then go hang out. I mean, if you sit down and you're like, I'm going to do this and get it done, saying, yeah, I've got 3 Android apps out. I mean, that's, somebody's like, oh, hey, you know, for us, it's like one example. Lion Pride's not, this isn't really a real example, but Lion Pride's not out on Android, and we actually looked at it, and the ROI didn't make sense, return on investment didn't make sense. But, you know, at the time when we were considering it, had somebody come in and said, you know, I do Android, and, you know, we might have had that person in and said, hey, see if you can do it.
Mhm.
And so, you know, it's timing, opportunity. If you know anybody that helps, use LinkedIn, use Facebook, go to the, you know, Boston Postmortem, go to all those events. You know, you can do the like, I'm gonna make my own business card thing. I mean, you can do that, or you could just sort of collect business cards. But, you know, just, if you attack it, if you're like pushing on every panel, like a panel's gonna give. It might give today, it might give in a month, it might give the following summer, but push, follow up, be courteous of other people's time, but, you know, don't be afraid to like continue to have a dialogue, or say, hey, I was working on this Android thing, and you know, can you give me some advice? I mean, I think everyone who works in games, at least, is really interested in game, well, I think most people are, games in the industry and being helpful. I mean, most people are good and interesting, I think, and then if you engage them, I think they can engage you back.
Right.
But they're not gonna engage you in here, right? You gotta, just saying, I mean, they might walk in, it's possible.
Okay. Oh, great. 15-minute break?
Yeah, 15-minute break.